curtain-draped table, the signal for a pair of uniformed crewmen to begin serving the meal. "Good evening, everyone." "Good evening, Captain," replied the group in unison. Since Grace and her lady's maid, Phoebe Bloom, had been travelling aboard the packet for the past several days, the shipboard routine was no longer daunting, and the passengers, especially Lord Collingwood, had all been agreeable company. Grace flicked a glance at the Earl, who sat beside her at the long mahogany table, chatting pleasantly with a woman to his right, Mrs. Cogburn, a plump matron travelling north to visit her brother. Mrs. Cogburn was a widow, as was Mrs. Franklin, her companion. Also seated at the table were a wealthy silk merchant from Bath and a newly married couple on their way to visit relatives in Scotland. Lord Collingwood laughed at something Mrs. Cogburn said, then casually shifted his attention to her. His eyes ran over her aqua silk gown, took in the auburn curls swept high on her head, lingered a moment on her bosom, then returned to her face. "If I might say so, you look particularly fetching tonight, Miss Chastain." "Thank you, my lord." "And those pearls you are wearing, they're quite unusual. I don't believe I have ever seen a string so perfectly matched or of such a rich colour." Unconsciously, her hand came up to the strand of pearls at her throat. The necklace was worth a fortune, a gift Grace probably should have refused, but Tori had insisted, and the necklace was so lovely. The moment Grace had put it on, she simply hadn't been able to resist. "They're very old," Grace told the Earl. 13th century. There's a rather tragic story behind them." "Really? Perhaps you will tell me sometime." "I would be happy to." The captain began speaking just then, relaying the progress they had made so far on their journey, then listing the delights on the menu for supper. Wine glasses were filled, and silver dishes appeared with an array of vegetables, meat, and fish. "So, my dear Miss Chastain, how did you pass your day?" Lord Collingwood leaned back as a uniformed waiter scooped a plump piece of chicken and lemon sauce onto his plate. "If the weather had been less inclement, I would have enjoyed a stroll. But the February day was overcast and chill, the seas choppy and rolling. Fortunately, she had never suffered mal de mer, as did her lady's maid and several other passengers aboard. Mostly I read." "And the book?" "A favourite volume of Shakespeare. Do you also enjoy reading, my lord?" "Why, yes, I do." He had slightly crooked teeth, yet the smile he gave her was not unpleasant. "And I, too, enjoy the Bard." The remark was followed by a discourse on King Lear, his lordship's favourite work. Grace joined in, saying that she most enjoyed Romeo and Juliet. "Ah, a romantic," the captain said, entering into the discussion. Grace smiled. "To tell you the truth, I never really thought of myself that way, but perhaps I am a bit of a romantic. And you, Captain Chambers? Which volume of Shakespeare do you favour?" There was no time to reply, as the salon door swung open and a burly seaman appeared at the top of the ladder. He made his way down to the salon and hurried over to speak to the captain. She couldn't hear what was being said, but after a minute, the captain pushed to his feet. "If you will excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, it appears duty calls." At the murmur that went around the room, Chambers gave them a reassuring smile. "I'm sure it's nothing to worry about. In the meantime, please continue to enjoy your meal." The stout grey-haired man departed, and conversation resumed. No one seemed unduly concerned, though it was obvious the passengers were curious about what might be occurring. "If it's anything of import," the Earl said, "I'm sure we'll find out when the captain returns." The group chatted amiably throughout the meal, and after they finished dessert, Lord Collingwood invited her for a stroll round the deck. "Unless, of course, it's too chill for you out there." "I would love to walk. A bit of fresh air sounds just the thing." As supper approached, there had been a slight break in the weather, and though it yet remained cold, the seas appeared somewhat less formidable. Lord Collingwood escorted her across the deck to the rail, and she took a deep breath of the brisk sea air. She could feel the pitch and roll of the sea, but the ocean was less hostile, and a thin sliver of moon rose over the water, casting a silver trail toward the horizon. Grace tilted her head back to admire the crystal-white stars glittering in the black night sky. "Do you see that cluster of stars overhead?" She pointed into the darkness above the tall ship's mast. "That is Orion, the hunter. Those 3 stars form his belt. Beside him, just there, that group is Taurus, the bull." The Earl's brown eyebrows went up. "Very impressive, my dear. I have studied the stars a bit myself, and you are exactly correct. You enjoy stargazing, Miss Chastain?"